Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Pesachim. We are up to Perek Aleph Mishnah Gimel. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat Neria ben Tzvetlana Ranbai ben Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden. Amen. The Mishnah discusses what one should do if he did not conduct the search at the proper time. Rabbi Yehuda says, Botkin or Arba Asar, one must search for Chametz on the night of the 14th of Nisan, Uba Arba Asar Shacharit, but if he missed that time, he must search in the morning of the 14th, Ubishat Abiu, and if he missed that time, he must search during the time that we dispose of our Chametz, which is the 6th hour of the day. This is how the Rav explains it. Now, the 6th hour, which is the 6th hour after daybreak, is called the time when we dispose of the Chametz, because the rabbis decreed that we must destroy all our Chametz at the beginning of this hour, like we will see in the next Mishnah. Now, an hour in this context is 1/12 of the period between the beginning of the daytime and the end of the daytime, which varies according to the time of the year. So for the sake of simplification, we will use the example of a day that begins at 6 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m., in which case each hour is 60 minutes long, and the 6th hour lasts from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now, if at the end of that hour, when Chametz becomes biblically prohibited, he has still not searched, Rabbi Yehuda says he should not search at all, because he might unthinkingly eat the Chametz that he finds, which would be a biblical transgression. However, the sages disagree, but the sages say, Lo badak or Arba, if one did not search on the night of the 14th, yivdok ba'Arba, he must search in the daytime of the 14th. Lo badak ba'Arba, if he did not search in the daytime of the 14th, yivdok betoch Moed, he must search during the holiday. Lo badak betoch Moed, and if he did not search during the holiday, yivdok lachar Moed, he must search after the holiday. Now we will explain that. We explain the Mishnah based off the Rav's second explanation. Now the sages require searching even after the time that Chametz becomes biblically prohibited, midday on the 14th, and they are not concerned that one might eat Chametz that he finds, since his whole purpose in looking for Chametz is to get rid of it. Now the sages also require one to search after the Chag, after the holiday, if he did not do so earlier, because Chametz that was in the possession of a Jew during Pesach is rabbinically forbidden after Pesach, like we will Bezrat Hashem see in chapter 2, Mishnah 2. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. Now, after searching for Chametz on the night or morning of the 14th, one may set aside some to eat before it becomes forbidden. According to the Rambam in Chametz Umatzah, chapter 3, halacha 1, he may set aside all the Chametz that he finds, even that which he does not intend to eat, until the time when it must be destroyed. The Mishnah explains how this Chametz should be treated. Umash mishayer, whatever chametz one leaves over to eat after the search, enichenu b'tzina, one should put it in a private, secure place. For example, he should cover the chametz with a heavy bowl, place it in a secure box, or suspend it high in the air, where small creatures cannot get to it, as Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, chapter 434, halacha 1. He should also make sure to put it out of the reach of children, as the Mishnah Berurah writes in chapter 434, Sif Katan 4, and the Mishnah writes, Kedesh lo yetzarich b'dika acharav. The reason one should put it in a private, secure place is so that he will not lose any and have to search for it. Now, the Tfelt Yisrael writes, if one put his chametz in an insecure place and some of it goes missing, he would have to search his house again for fear that a small animal or child took it to another part of his house. However, the Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch, where we quoted earlier, Orach Chaim, chapter 434, halacha 1, in that section, that if you put it in a secure place where it's not accessible to animals or children and some goes missing, he can safely assume that an adult took it and ate it, and a new search is not necessary. Now, although the previous Mishnah taught us that we do not have to worry that an animal might have dragged chametz to a place that was already searched, in our case, where it's known that some chametz is missing, the Gemara says we have no choice but to consider that to be a possibility. And that is the end of Mishnah Gimel. Now, according to biblical law, we may eat and have benefit from chametz on the day before Pesach, on Erev Pesach, until midday, after which even ownership of chametz is forbidden and we must dispose of it. The rabbis, though, set the deadline earlier, and that is what we'll be discussing in Mishnah Daled. Rabbi Meir says, Ochlin kol chamesh. We may eat chametz the entire 5th hour, meaning chametz becomes rabbinically forbidden at the end of the 5th hour, v'solfin b'tchilat shesh, and we burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour. Now, although chametz is biblically permitted until midday, The rabbis were concerned that people might miscalculate the time by 1 hour. They therefore made the deadline an hour earlier. Now, in the times of the Mishnah, people estimated the time of the day by the position of the sun in the sky, which often led to error. The rabbis prohibited chametz an hour earlier than the biblical time, so that even if someone miscalculated by 1 hour, he would not transgress a biblical prohibition. Now, according to Rabbi Meir, a safety barrier of 1 hour was enough. It was not necessary to set the deadline 2 hours before midday, because people were not likely to make such a great mistake. However, Rabbi Yehuda rules more strictly. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, but Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ochlin kol arba." We may eat chametz the entire 4th hour, meaning chametz is permitted only until the end of the 4th hour. V'tolin kol chamesh, and we suspend it the entire 5th hour, meaning chametz is suspended in an intermediate state during the 5th hour. We may not eat it, but are not required to burn it. The Rav writes, during this hour, one is still allowed to feed chametz to his animals or have any other benefit from it besides eating. V'sofin b'tchilat shesh, and we burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the rabbinic prohibition against eating chametz takes effect 2 hours before the biblical deadline, because the rabbis were afraid that a person might make a mistake even by 2 hours, and such a large mistake could occur on a cloudy day, the Rav says, when the sun is not visible and people cannot tell the time from its position in the sky. However, this stringency applies only to eating chametz. The rabbis did not forbid having other types of benefit from chametz, nor did they require us to burn it until just 1 hour before the biblical deadline of midday. And the amount of chametz in which one can have benefit, meaning selling it or feeding it to animals, is often much greater than the amount one can eat. Therefore, more time is given for having benefit from chametz to lessen the chances of the owner suffering a serious financial loss. And the Rav does tell us, "V'alacha ki Rabbi Yehuda." The halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.